episode of the Moz House Podcast. I'm your host, Hunter Begun, and I'm here with a very special guest, Simón Vega, who is our current artist in resident, and he is here as a special partnership with the Parish Art Museum as part of an upcoming show, Tropical Space Castaways. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
Of course, this is awesome that you're here. So glad. So can you, for people who don't know, can you tell us a little about yourself, a little about what type of art you do?
Sure. My name is Simón Vega. I am 51 years old. I'm from El Salvador, one of the smallest countries in Central America. And my work has a lot to do with my surroundings and with the history in the area in all Central America. I'm always drawing from that in my work, which mainly it's mainly installation, sculpture. I work a lot with found materials and an aesthetic that combines certain technological, even space technologies, with a shantytown kind of building and do-it-yourself. That's inspired in El Salvador, the people and their surroundings. So that encompasses a lot, but mainly that's where I'm going with my work. I'm always asking myself who we are, the three questions: where do we come from, and where are we going?
For anyone who just happened to stumble upon this podcast without knowing who you are, you gotta look them up. The art is amazing. I think honestly you have something for everybody to enjoy. And the further I learned more about you, the more grand the projects became. I was amazed. So I definitely want to talk about your drawings a little bit, because those are exquisite, honestly. Like, someone who would like to be able to draw that well, was that really the first art form that you fell in love with, or is that just something you liked?
Yeah, even though what I show more, it's sculpture and installations, I would say drawing is my first love and really the essence or the root to many other forms of expression. So I've been doing drawing since I was a kid, since I can remember, really, and some of my first drawings were actually Spider-Man and Batman and basic superheroes and some other Japanese, characters. I would also draw a Kiss, the band. As a child, I really liked it, and my teachers thought that was some sort of satanic.
Oh, yeah, Kiss, yeah.
So drawing has been with me always, and it's a very important thing in my life, not only in my art, but in my life in general. And many of all the sculptures I do and the work that I do, I'm always sketching it first. And I do a lot of sketching and studies, different types of drawings. So always when I do a sculpture, I will do different types of drawings around it. Some are visualizations of how this is going to look in the space, or how this is going to look finished. Then others are about the structure, and those are more diagrams and have measurements and have a scale to them. So they are more like engineering drawings, very practical. Then there are other ones that are after the sculpture, for example, and might show you inside and outside at the same time. Some might be blueprints that you would usually do before, but I will do them afterwards. And they're on canvas, like blue and white line. And so drawing really has a lot to do with my art practice in general. It's also a way to observe and understand things, because nowadays we hardly take the time to really observe. We capture things with the camera, but while you're doing a drawing from life, which I love to do it, then you're really understanding how things are made, how's the material, why does it look this way, and so all these different type of drawings, I use to to navigate through life, and then make my artwork.
Wow, amazing. I just want to touch on something back that I just realized I didn't touch on. I can't believe you're 51 years old. You look very young.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's amazing. Can't believe it.
I always get that, and I think I live. Well, I didn't mention this before, but an important thing for me, I live at the beach in El Salvador, the coastal area called La Libertad, which means the freedom. So I love that too, and I surf. I've been surfing since I was 13 years
Wow.
old, and always been in contact with the ocean. So I also think that helps a lot. The sun and the salty water and a good life. Well, there's also, of course, a lot of problems around it, and we'll talk about it later. But I think that helps a lot. A little bit of exercise, sun, and salt.
That's amazing. So, Southampton and Shinnecock, kind of like the cold version on the beach right now, this part of the season. Have you been to any of the beaches nearby?
I haven't. I have not. I can't believe it when I look at a map, even when I'm getting an Uber, how close I am. But I haven't been able to make it. The truth is that I've been very focused on the installation of the show. And then also have been walking around Mass House, which it has a little bit of woods and water, the river I can see. So that has been my contact with nature, but I'm very much looking forward. And because I'm coming in April, I think also if I don't get around to now, April, I'll make sure to do a little bit more tourism.
Yes. My only suggestion for beaches, there's a bunch of good ones, but my favorite is Cooper's Beach.
Okay.
And April's a great time to come by because the summer people still aren't back yet, and there's not a ton of traffic, and you can basically, depending on time, you go the whole beach to yourself just to explore. And
I would love to. I'm really into it. I mean, it's so different, the Pacific from Atlantic, and then with this weather and the trees, so different, but I'm super into it. I mean, I'm really looking forward to checking it out, and I haven't even seen that many pictures, so it'll be very surprising and fresh, I hope.
There's unfortunately not the best surfing waves there.
Right,
although
yes. I did meet an artist, however, that told me that there are some hidden little gems
really?
here and there on certain with certain storms and stuff. So.
Oh yeah, I guess with the storms, the waves do get pretty serious.
Yeah,
and that is kind of worrisome in the end, the long run, of how big the waves get. But it is what it is. Okay, so let's get back. I want to take more of a delve into your process of, especially I guess for this your current show at the Parish. I know you mentioned that sometimes the drawings come after, but I'm interested in. So when you're starting your new piece, do you start by finding something and you're like, oh, this is the perfect start, or do you base it off your drawings and kind of find the parts that fit?
This might be different from work to work, or even more from series to series. I guess I work a lot. My process it will always go towards an idea, a connection of ideas or concept. So it really has. I mean, it will have many things done as artworks as I explore the idea. So I once I start, I know that there will be a bunch of different things. There might be drawings, and there might be sculpture, there might be a video or an animation that comes with it. I know that I'll be in it for a while, so it's almost like starting a relationship, First you're dating and you're like, okay, is this where I want to go, and is this the kind of idea or investigation? Because sometimes you just like bump upon something. You're like you're reading a book and you find something you find really interesting and start going from there. Others, you start with something that happened, a trip, traveling, something around you that really surprised you. Or sometimes it's something that it's happening over and over in an everyday life. Sometimes this is bothering you. It's not always. It hardly has to do with the classical idea of beauty and arriving at a finished place. It's more of more of a trip and a relationship that will take you unexpected places. So, for example, what I'm doing now, what I'm showing now at the Parish, it's part of a series called Tropical Space Proyectos, Tropical Space Projects, and that series, it started because I was doing. I had been invited to a show called Solution, and I had been doing research about solution to the main problems in the world. You know, it was kind of a kind of naive way to go about it, but also just like some basic stuff like water and shelter and what do we need as humans, and then bumped into this rover, the Mars rovers, these robotic explorers that they're on the Earth, and they're on another planet, and they're looking for sources of water, life possibilities, and there's many at that time. The one called Spirit, I think was around. This was like 10, 12, even maybe 12 years ago, and so I saw that, and I'm like, wow, they're so cool, right? These little robots with 6 wheels and solar panels, and so I thought they looked really cool. And at the same time, I was researching what's being done in Latin America for communities, and I was researching this particular cultural think tank in Venezuela, and how, you know, when you took certain things to a community, that community could, you know, begin to heal and thrive, particularly sports and cultural events. So they were about creating these activities that eventually found their place there, but at the beginning they could be nomad. So I was combining those two ideas that have nothing to do with each other. And for one, NASA was spending like $49 million in developing this particular robotic explorer, and then to go to Mars, another this many millions. And then while I was doing the other research, I could see that Latin America was, like many parts of Africa, areas that had been considered by the main powers as, this is like lost, you know, there's nothing to do about it. This is just like too chaotic, too many people, and it will never thrive. Of course, now I know it's more complex than that, but it was just weird that we're giving up on this world and we're looking for life in another world that is super bare and arid, and spending so many millions to find life there, when, if you look the other way, in these other worlds, what we call the third world, even though it's not politically correct anymore, I really like to use them because they're like two planets. First world and third world is just like two planets, and third world has so many life and possibilities and ideas and creativity. That's how I see it, coming from there. So we're giving up on this, and with a fraction of what you're investing to go to Mars, you could really make such a difference to these areas and make them very positive. But of course, that's not the idea. That's not the program. But then from these two things that I was researching, reading about, seeing diagrams, seeing photographs, the idea came to merge the two of them. So on one hand, the rovers, the robotic Mars explorers, and then on the other hand, what I found that really kind of was very similar, completely different but very similar, are the street vendor cards that people in El Salvador and other places will make in order to sell candy, cigarettes, whatever, and make a short money for the everyday living. So a lot of people, that's their main income, you know, and they live off of that. And they turn anything from baby strollers, baby carriages, to little, carriages into carts where they will sell. And they're very ingenious, they are very smart where to keep the cups and where to keep the money and how everything fits and you can put it back together, and very flexible structure. So I thought how it deals also with the territory, how we will go on the street walk to the street, and how everything was like a very interesting way to solve the problems of everyday survival in Latin America and Central America. So I was comparing that to the rovers and then merged the two of them, and we have two of these at the Parish at the exhibition now that are that, and we will probably have a workshop in April in which students or museum goers will be invited to participate in making one. So it's got a lot to do with do-it-yourself, way of doing things. Yeah,
that is pretty amazing connections that you just kind of were able to make for me. Quick kind of silly question: have you named the rovers yet?
Wow, it's interesting. I haven't. I think at one point I did just to differentiate, but they don't have names like they should. Even though a lot of them look like, because it's also inspired in, and people call them Wallies. Because
Wally? Yeah.
They're kind of similar, yeah. But mine weren't inspired in Wallies. Wallies were inspired in rovers, so we have a common thing. And and aside from that, I love that movie. But
the movie is really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, God, just the word has escaped me for a second. But yes, when you brought up the third world and that it's here and they're wasting so much money to go to these barren planets because the cities are barren and everything, and then they've done it to themselves. But then we're over here, we have our tropical paradises. They're giving up on the earth already. Yeah. It's so insane that if we've invested probably everything we've ever put into trying to find somewhere new, we probably could have almost saved the planet by now. Yeah. So I never even thought about it that way. I just thought they were trying to escape.
And I always also, what about, I love, of course, as you can tell, science fiction. Especially I like really 80s and 90s science fiction, where we're always trying to escape the world that's collapsing and going somewhere else. So I think right now it's a particular time when that seems to be urgent. And there are, in fact, many programs that are trying to develop that and life in space. But so I think that we are giving up on that, and the idea of them being two different planets. It's important also for approaching the idea of the other. Who's the other person? Who's the other? And in philosophy, I think it's very important. And in the world, different groups of people, different way of understanding and dealing, different ethnicities or what we call races. And the way in which we see the other is very important. And what about, in the science fiction and the conspiracy theories, going back to that, that probably Mars and the moon were already inhabited by humans or humanoids, and then we were the ones responsible for them being the way they are now. Even though that's, I don't know, there's no way to prove that scientifically. It kind of makes sense, and you can see rivers and stuff marked in Mars and makes you think, and there's been more than one, literally, excursions into that theme. And I like to think about that. My work has a lot to do with futurism, in science fiction. Also has a lot to do with archaeology and the idea of the past, and also this idea of circular time.
Very interesting. Did you have any? No, this is not about your art, but what were your favorite science fiction books or shows or movies when you were?
Yeah, I did read some 70s Isaac Asimov's books like I, Robot and others, and I thought they were really interesting. But as a young kid, it was mostly movies that I really loved, science fiction, and I of course Star Wars, just like a big thing, and I've done artworks and sculptures about some spaceships in Star Wars. Definitely my favorite by far. But then, of course, in the 80s, there was a lot of other stuff and some really smart ones in the 90s, like Starman. I remember that a lot because it showed us how an alien would not necessarily be humanoid at all. It might be more like a light or something, but then it would need to find a human form in order to be here and communicate. I remember that movie. Also, Contact, Jodie Foster, which is actually based on a book by Carl Sagan, I believe. And then this idea of traveling and getting news. First, sending out news ourselves in that Viking probe, and then getting it back, a response and instructions to make a spaceship. I really love that movie. I thought very smart. I didn't get around to read the book. I've read a bunch of books on Star Wars sagas that were not in the movies. I read a lot of those and love them. They're super, just like adventures, kind of kids' adventures. And nowadays I'm hooked in some of those series, like Ahsoka, like that
I
one.
love Ahsoka.
And first season Mandalorian, loved it. So and then a bunch of movies, weird movies that I wouldn't say they're so there, but yeah, they have influenced me. Also, a series of anime from Japan from the 80s called Mazinger Z. Here it was called Tensor Z or something, and it wasn't that popular, but in Latin America it was very popular and was about a robot that was piloted by a human. It was the first time that was done, and it was like a little spaceship that was placed on the brain, so to speak, of the robot, and it was amazing, and we loved it. And then I always remember that at the end, when they were showing the credits, they would have these background images of the robot, but like engineering diagrams, see-through. You could see inside, like the boot, and how it would use these cushionings and all these mechanical elements. And I really like that. I love that. And I do that a lot in my drawings. I will take engineering diagrams and use that, and then play around with it, as to what goes here and what goes there, and a secret stash here, and some other real stuff over there. So then it just becomes very playful. I will take the spaceships and these ideas, and mainly as an artist, just like play with them.
I really do love the drawings of the inside of the spaceship, and so. One of the questions I do have, how do you add a bunch of humor to your work, and at the same time you're basically shedding light on very, very important topics, but there's always something of like, the astronaut always has some type of entertainment, which I personally am like, if he's going to be there by himself,
yes,
he's going to need some video games or the beer area or whatever. So I want to know how that came about really in your art.
Yeah, I like that question because it's a mix of very domestic things, in these works. The sculptures, and also I like to think the artwork they have many levels, many layers. Some of them are easier to get to. Some you might need to read a little bit. Some are humorous. But it's always there's a deep, serious issue behind that, So, but you cannot be that serious or tragic all the time, even if the topic is, and that's something I think I find a lot in El Salvador, where bad things and situations since I was a kid, I remember Civil War, and nowadays it's so serious and scary, but people deal with it through humor. And the humor really breaks the tension, and it's so important. And we are a colorful people and territory, so I think it's important to have that in the work always. And I remember going to a biennial in, I think 2002 or something, Central American biennial, and seeing all the work from different artists and some amazing. There's many Central American artists that I I deeply respect and like their work. But at that one, I remember that it was very tragic. It was all about the war and the gangs and injustice, social injustice, and of course, it's important as artists that we talk about this. But I thought that the way we were talking about it, especially Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, was too tragic, and so you kind of didn't want to look at that work, and the work wasn't something that you wanted to get deeper into. It was just straight up very violent, and which our reality is. But then there's also these other things that we should not look around because it's very powerful. So, sharing, generosity, love, and humor. I try to have that into play with the work. So, for example, in the blueprint drawings that are actually done either after the sculpture is made or just of something I didn't create yet, they work as a diagram, and they're inspired in specific diagrams that I've found on NASA reports or books about especially the space race. I'm mainly inspired in the space race because yes, and I'll get back to the drawings, but in general, and I guess also for the people that have not seen the work, what's most recognizable are these spaceships and space capsules, space stations that are inspired in specific ships from the space race. And what the space race was a competition between the Soviet Union and the communist way of understanding the world, and the United States and capitalism, and that way as a system to understand life. And so these two were battling each other after World War II, as you know, and then Cold War came about, which was it really couldn't happen as a war because it was a nuclear war that would destroy the planet. And then, but however, the confrontation played out in other arenas, and some were proxy wars, like in part Vietnam and Guam and other invasions, and then El Salvador was one of these wars where it was a U.S.-backed government, right-wing government, against left-wing Cuban-backed communist guerrilla. And that was a civil war that took place for 12 years in El Salvador. And it's important for us to think about that. But we were living 10 years ago still with those two main forces as political parties in a society very polarized. And I thought we were failing also to see how our conflict was part of a bigger global conflict. So in my work, I was trying to do that, and say, okay, who we are and what we're into right now, gangs and economic situation in which we depend on people, Salvadorians living in the United States, to send them money. That's the main income of our country. Those things, were a byproduct of the war, which also was a byproduct of a bigger global conflict. So I'm trying to understand this in this series of works, and that has a lot to do with it. Now things have changed. Our country is no longer polarized, and so some of these new subjects, as a touristic colonization, come off also in the works at the parish. But to go back to the drawings, I will do these diagrams where you see the inside of a capsule, and I am again mixing up first world space high-end technology with third world do-it-yourself survival, living, and I love those diagrams to begin with as drawings. They're amazing. They're like cutouts of the capsules, and you can see all the details, and they have like little arrows or lines that explaining with words. So as a graphic element, I love that. And I came upon them because I was researching spaceships from the Cold War. So so I'm doing that, and then I find this. I'm like, oh, wow, this is so cool. And I could do this as a blueprint, and it would look amazing as a painting, and I start playing with these drawings, and we'll keep some things and we'll change others. So some, particular tank might become, like a water jug. And I'm thinking, and then while researching, I began to see, because I also did research going into some shanty towns and very poor people's dwellings, and it's amazing what you find. Like, it's not all chaotic or dirty. Like in some shanty towns, which is what I'll call them, but they are, like marginal neighborhoods. Some are like entirely made of found objects and are very shabby, but others are more solid, and also some are like kind of chaotic, left around dirty, and some are pretty clean, and functioning. And you see all these things and how they deal with water. There's a water place for a lot of houses, and you go and pick your water there. And that also is like in the past, when people would have fountains in these old cities like Rome and some in Mesoamerica as well. So yeah, I'm looking at this, then I'm looking at the high technology, and sometimes you find the same needs. So as humans, we have very basic needs, and I'm playing with this a lot also in the idea of the castaway. But it's like, first of all, you need water, you need food, and then you need shelter. If you have that, then say after that, then you're like, okay, surviving, even if you have nothing else. But after that, what do you need? What is important? So, for example, I see is a certain level of comfort, or start adding comfort to your shelter, to the way you will make and keep your food, beverages, etc., etc. Then you need to connect and communicate and game also. So yeah, sometimes these capsules will have inside like a Nintendo game console, and I'm thinking of that relates to something you will need when you're isolated, but also it's like every day we're already isolated. I mean, we're already living in capsules. Like a lot of people are living in their rooms, in Japan and in other societies, and also a lot of us are living in very few places. We spend our house is a little capsule, then we get on another little capsule, which is a car, and we go to a third little capsule, which is our office, if we have them. And then we're pretty much moving there, and it's our very safe comfort zone. But these ones are like extreme. It's very super small space, so it's really neat to know how can you make your basic needs fit into that. And that's kind of what the drawings are about. So it's combining, and they have the same problems, like where do you get water if you're in a space capsule? It's the same where you get water if you're in a very marginal town without running water. How do you get the power? How do you store it? And food, same. So I'm playing with these two, and then it becomes funny. But in reality, they are kind of the same needs. Clean air, what to do with your waste stuff. And then I'll throw some stuff like video gaming, or there's a little pot stash here and hidden, and then there's also this other stuff, and it's just like playing with the narrative a little bit.
Yeah. So one thing I really like about them is you can kind of look at any of your blueprints and for 20 minutes and you'll find new stuff every time. It's always amazing. I just wanted to stare at them all day because I was like, and there were so many of them. I was like, how do you even make these this detailed and have so many? It was amazing. I was jealous, honestly. It's like, if I could draw like this, just wait. So this is kind of a silly question, but it's like in everyday life, like, do you ever see like an object and you kind of see the blueprint in your mind? Has that ever happened to you?
No, not necessarily. I am always looking at objects and trying to understand some of them, but sometimes it's more like when I'm making the blueprint, it's like it'd be fun, right? Like you look at something and then you're looking at all these different details and points of view and stuff, and it's kind of moving. But for example, when I am making a blueprint and I'm like, okay, I need particular 5-gallon water jug. What do they look like, and what do they? How's the shine work? I might make a study, which is a drawing from life that you're like just studying it just to get it. Or just observe it carefully and then just go, because it's important. There are all these differences with the type of drawing you can make. So the diagram that wants to explain the use of something, and this drawing, we always see it when we're putting together a table from IKEA or a TV or whatever. Sure. You have those drawings which are never have tone, never have shading, just are linear and very basic about the human figure. And so I'm using that, so it's very linear in the blueprints, whereas the study might consider, light, shine, and other stuff. But so I will look at a particular object to then translate it to this diagram-like drawing in the blueprint. Yeah.
Very interesting. So we've covered a lot about like either the first or the last step of the process with the drawing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so kind of now I'm very interested, a lot of people are interested about how you find the objects. One thing I'm really interested about is there an object that is the like, oh my God, I found one again, this is perfect. Like, is there one object you're like, this is the best thing, there's just always have?
It's funny. Well, it depends, of course. Now we're talking about sculpture, so it's mainly found objects. For example, the rovers might be sometimes 100% found objects.
Wow.
And once I start developing them, then there are certain parts or structures that are very valuable to me, and to get them old or faded, preferable. But also trying to understand how the street vendor cart works and how the rover works at the same time. Then the object depends on that, on how it will function. But for example, people think, this is common. People think that it's really easy and super cheap to make these sculptures with found objects. People, because of the question sometimes they ask me, people would think you almost just like walk out in the street and wow, it's there, a corrugated sheet that's kind of rusty but not too much and has this color. But no, it takes so much time to find them, and specific places within a city. So you also have to learn how to navigate the city in a different way. And because the majority of the space capsules are kind of big, are at least the size of a car or of a van, then they will, to ship them, it's too expensive, especially at the beginning in my career. If people were to have interest in an artist from El Salvador and bring him over to New York, and if that was to happen, when it did happen, they didn't have the money to pay, $20,000 to ship this work from El Salvador. So I started developing a way of doing this and solving this problem, which was mainly go to the place and build it there. And have some basic tools and small space and do it there, but have it thought out and have the structure, measurements, list of objects all ready to go prior to me leaving El Salvador. And having someone to help me find these objects. So that was the way I did it before when I started, and the way I'm still doing many of these things. Like for the parish, I had help from them, particularly Kevin at the parish was just amazing in getting me a bunch of stuff from the street, from outside, but mainly also from people's yards. Like sometimes I'll go to junkyards, depending on size and how much I need. Sometimes I'll find stuff around where I'm staying. Like here I found some stuff around Mass House.
Oh, nice. I was going to ask about that.
So I'm always looking unexpected places, or the institution might have some material left over that are good. Usually it's a bit here and there depending on the size. But yeah, there are some objects that are harder to find, and when I find them, it's like, wow, amazing. Like, for example, old TV monitors from the 80s, which I love how they look. They're very spacey, you know, and
what are those called
really
again?
hard to find, like surveillance monitors, they call them, or some aren't really surveillance. They're just like small portable TVs from the 80s, and they're so hard to find.
Aren't they really rare now? Even
really
in general,
rare.
just you
In
can't even buy
general,
them.
like even in El Salvador, I can hardly find them, and there's like one place and then a few people that will fix them because they need to be fixed, and then they don't have the old elements to fix them, so it's hard to find them. But for example, now for the show The Parish, Kevin was able to find like, I don't know, 10.
Kevin found 10 of them?
10 of them.
How's that
they
possible?
All work.
How's that possible?
It's actually, we're talking about it. They're in perfect state. They almost are not good because they're in such good state that they don't use worn.
You're gonna have
they
to...
don't look worn or anything. But
wow.
They're amazing. I can't get over it. So if you go to the show, you'll see them. They're all functioning, and I love usually to have them on static.
Yeah.
You know, I as a kid, I always thought static was just like the space. It's just like stars and space. So I always have them on static, and I love that static noise also, kind of weird white noise. So yeah, I'll have them there. I'm really happy that was an unexpected find.
Yeah.
You know, so but there are I have like categories. There are materials that you can pretty much find anywhere, and then there are materials that almost nowhere, and then anything in between. For example, things that I can always find, I would use from the beginning: cardboard, water bottles, wood, plywood. Then things that are, depending where you are, I use a lot of corrugated metal sheet for roofing, because we find them a lot in El Salvador, and the really shiny ones are the poorer ones, the less quality material, but it's also the one that looks more science fiction because it's so shiny. So I will use that a lot, but then, for example, in Europe, they simply don't exist, you know, and here also very hard to find them in El Salvador, especially if I want them rusted. You know, so now big cities, good to find old materials. Like Mexico City is just, there's no better place, I think, in this side of the world. But also New York City is amazing. You find a bunch of stuff that people just like leave out.
Leave out on the street.
And it's amazing. So some places have junkyards, some places don't. You know, I like, for example, in California, I would find a lot of junkyards. That didn't sell, just received materials. So that was a problem, and I wasn't able to really get. I had to get even half of the materials I needed there. So we also sometimes I have to age some newer materials, and I don't always work from just used found materials. A lot of it is repurposed. A lot of it is secondhand materials. Sometimes it's new even, but very cheap materials. So I will play with that area, and what I really avoid, I guess, is just like marble,
Marble,
you know, bronze, and all the classical, which is then hard for me to call myself a sculptor, just because I always think when someone says sculpture, I think just like huge arms and hands, and just like handling big, rough classical materials. Where what I do is more of an assemblage. I just like combine all these things together, and sometimes they're just placed. They are not even fixed.
Wow. That's one of my questions was, if do you always, Jeremy's mom really wanted to know if you only ever used found materials. So that is your answer, Anthony.
Yeah. It depends, you know. I really have to. You really have to be resourceful and adapt. It's part of it when you're doing this kind of thing. So, for example, there's a Gemini capsule now at the Parish, which is a part of a collection, the ES collection in Miami. And that one I originally did for a project in Belgium, in the town of Saint Nicholas, which was really, I really loved it. And it was just, took place in all the city. And so we wanted to do a capsule there, and I was thinking of a Mercury, but that requires a corrugated metal sheet, and there was just no way to find it. Like, we looked so many places, and we could not find anything even similar to that. So I was getting like disillusioned, like, what am I gonna do? That's like the main exterior material that I will need, and to ship that's really expensive, and so it doesn't make sense. But then going to a garden section in one of these huge hardware stores in Belgium, we were able to find a corrugated sheet, not old but new, that they use for like barns and stuff, and it's kind of made out of asbestos or something like that, and it's black, so it's not it's corrugated, which gave you the idea of housing, but it wasn't old, it was new, but it was black. And then went back to the books and just happened to find that the Mercury was metal, but the Gemini, which was the first capsule in two persons got into space, that was black. The color was black, so it was convenient. And then so I changed it to that and made a Gemini. And then also then went about it, the thing about Gemini being two people, and so also the idea of domestic as in living together. And so the interior is very domestic, very colorful. Also, I'm always doing contrasts and opposing forces. So the outside is really dark and black, and the interior is like super colorful and fruity and kitsch. And for example, in that work, to answer Jeremy's mom's mass question, in that one in particular, hardly any found materials.
Wow.
In fact, the majority are either repurposed new materials, or some I found in like a yard sale in Belgium. Others come from El Salvador. They're all super cheap materials, and a bunch of them, and toys and stuff, but they are not found in that case in particular. In others, yes. In that one, no. So I'm usually mixing them. And also something that you'll see in this exhibition, there are 5 spacesuits, which is something I've been doing since 2019. And has to, of course, then this, for example, the spacesuits, they branch out from Tropical Space Proyectos. The first ones are inspired in the spacesuits used by either the Soviet space program or NASA during 50s and 60s. I love those designs in particular. Whereas I don't like SpaceX at all. I think they're terrible design. I mean, not designers, the design themselves are something I really don't connect with, you know. So I really connect with 50s and 60s aesthetic. I think it really cool, especially like the space stuff. So, and a lot of domestic stuff was very spacey too, you know. And so, well, going back to the spacesuits, I'm looking at them, and but by then I wasn't thinking too much about Cold War and that opposition, but what was happening now in El Salvador and surrounding areas regarding tourism. So I did one work about one space capsule that wasn't space race either, which was developed by a Russian space program, not Soviet, and that was a capsule that was supposed to go into space for tourism purposes specifically. And a really funny shape of this capsule. And so, but it was a hotel, you know, and you could only go there if you had like, I don't know, $80 million, you know, to spend a couple of nights in space. So I thought that was so crazy, you know, and I was traveling at that time and was using these capsule hostels that you see a lot in Asia. And I thought it was a cool thing to connect to. So, but then I was thinking mainly tourism. What are we willing to do for tourism, you know, and the way in which we travel. And a lot of my work is exploration, so this is a main thing about it. But not so Cold War, more like, okay, we're going to these areas. It could be space, it could be deep water, it could be, you know, if you're from Austria and you go to El Salvador, like you definitely your body's not prepared. It will resist, you know, it's unnatural to go there. So we create these spacesuits to be able to have this pressurized thing, this air, oxygen, and this protection. So, but we're not meant to be there. So I thought that was, to begin with, interesting to think about and to play with.
Yeah.
And that didn't go only to space exploration, but I thought it was actually a metaphor for tourism. And then started thinking a lot about tourists and tourism. And now we're living this situation in El Salvador where there's this big tourist and real estate development project all over the coast of El Salvador. And that's really making huge changes to the territory, to local communities, to the ecosystem, to water, what will we do with water. And the main and better lands are going to people from other countries, not Salvadorian. We're not protecting our land. And in that respect, I connect a lot with also the Native American indigenous movements and struggle to keep their lands, and be able to have this also for their future generations. So it's really terrible that we're doing that. And I also did a residency in Tulum, and Tulum's crazy. Also, you will see these amazing huts very close to the ocean, but it's terrible for the ecosystem. They don't even have electricity. They use, gas for all these huge hotels. It's really crazy.
They use gas for
gasoline. Imagine to power up these air conditions that are 24/7 blasting. So it's very contradictory. You're paying a lot of money to go and get this natural experience, but you're being super unnatural about it. And that's what we do with tourism in general. So I started seeing that in El Salvador, and then thinking about this. And I've done things as a tourist. I am a tourist as well. And then you start thinking about this, that wherever you go, you are expecting to have these things that connect with your comfort, reality, place where you come from. So if you now go to a country and you are not expecting to learn any of the words of the local language, they better speak English. You are not going to adapt to this weather. There better be AC and warmth. And then you need to have Wi-Fi. You need to have bottled water, and then so you become very specific, and that's what's going on in the idea of the spacesuit. You are creating this artificial environment for you to go to a place where you don't belong. And then that's why also the Hawaiian or Aloha shirt came about. Again, while reading about colonization and contemporary colonization and these ideas, I found, and I think someone mentioned it in a conversation, and then I did research how the Aloha shirt is really not a creation of Hawaiian people, right?
Oh.
It's a creation of Japanese developers or entrepreneurs that were they were seeing that there wasn't a souvenir for people to take home after going to Hawaii. So they created these prints and then sold these clothing items. But they have nothing to do with Polynesian culture, which is very rich, in their different arts and manifestations. So, and then what do they represent, these prints? Well, they represent this idea of paradise, which is very shallow, pretty, sunset, palm trees, flowers, but it's not deep, doesn't really connect, there's no roots in it. So, they're nice. They are colorful. Can't blame anyone for wearing them. I wear them too. I find them super cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I bet Jeremy will probably wear one to your opening. He often wears a new. That's like, I feel like he wears lots of Hawaiian shirts or Hawaiian-esque shirts.
Cool.
So it's
they're
very
kind
fun.
of extravagant, right? And especially here.
Yeah, I kind of make a joke about that. Every time we have a new big event, he'll break out a brand new Hawaiian shirt to be all fancy.
Oh my goodness!
So,
wow. Now I'm looking forward to that.
I hope he breaks. I really hope I'm not wrong and he breaks one out. We'll see.
That'd be amazing. Yeah. I love them, really. They're super fun, right? And they're super colorful. So it's also like to make them funny, right? This spacesuit, really kind of serious and grand, but it's made out of these Hawaiian, very colorful shirts. But yeah, there's this also this other layer about a more critical about as we come to other territories, we have a preconceived idea of what it's supposed to be. And we hardly do any real research or go to the real people and live as they live. So we stayed in a bubble, and that's kind of what it's about. Those spacesuits in particular.
I really, I really love your explanation of the spacesuits. It really sometimes it's hard to have all these realizations of what the art means on your own, and then when somebody gives you at least guidance towards it, you're like, oh my god, this is amazing. It's one reason I love doing the podcast.
Right.
Is not only me, but so everyone who's listening now gets to really be like, oh my god, they already liked it, and now they're like, oh my god, it had all these extra meanings.
Yeah.
And you get to learn so much.
I think that's the thing about art. I mean, the art I like is about that, you know, and it's about life, and the art itself is just like a tiny part that you are able to see and share, but there's all these other things that you're not able to put it out there. So when we are able, and I am also grateful, you give me this time to connect with your listeners, then of course you'll see this, and then you'll notice when you go to the exhibition, you'll notice that the spacesuits have like badges, and the badges are like Wi-Fi signal and stuff like that. And now, okay, that this is why. And then you, ideally, I think with art, then you'll go like, oh, I want to know more about, you know, Aloha shirts, or I want to know more about this development program. And it's true. And oh, wow, now I can see it in my country as well. And then you start connecting the dots. But it's very helpful to have a title that is suggestive, a bit of a statement nowadays, just because you're working with so many ideas and sometimes are contradictory. So it helps out to have some.
I definitely think your art almost invokes people doing their own research into it. Makes people interested. You're like, what is that?
Yeah.
And then they like look it up, and they're like, oh my god, they learned it. Now they have a whole history lesson about the Cold War and all things that are going on. Yeah. So I can't stop thinking about it. But the box, the 10 TVs you're able to find, I have this tidbit of information. So those TVs are so important, hard to find now, because the old gaming systems only run properly on those TVs.
Oh wow!
And everywhere else, there's like a special. The wires make it so there's no latency. Everything's exact. So the whole professional gaming community are like trying to find these TVs, and they can't find anything. So I cannot believe you're able to find. People would probably kill for that. Like the gamers, it's insane. And just there's 10. I mean, we're also surrounded like some of the richest places on the planet. Of course, they're just throwing off the TVs, but they don't even realize how much they're worth.
Oh my goodness. Not
just art, but just people are like searching far and wide. They can't find
them.
anything.
You'll be like you'll go crazy like I want, because just like the designs, you know, where you turn them on, how all the controls, everything is really beautiful, and they're in perfect condition. I think Kevin told me that the owner was a person that already passed away. And he repaired these TVs, so he kept this and repaired them, and now the son, who was so kind to lend them to us for the exhibition, he has them but has no use for them, and doesn't know how to repair them either. So yeah, hopefully something can come out of this. But I was definitely very fortunate to have Kevin find this. Definitely.
Yeah, Kevin sounds awesome.
So
just the fact that he was able to.
He's great. No, he got me. I'm like, oh, maybe you can get a surfboard. I know there's surfing culture in New York, of course, but we'll be able to find them. How many are old? Because I was looking for an old surfboard, and he found one. I don't know where, like Craigslist, or I don't know if Facebook Marketplace. These places have amazing things, but we got a very big old longboard that looks amazing, and also these finds. I'm really surprised. I mean, I knew we were going to find things just because it was New York, but we're far from the city, so it's different too. Not so urban, and then the waste is managed differently. But we have been able to get so many amazing things, really, from people lending and then others buying. But yeah, and Kevin has been amazing. Yeah.
So I do want to talk. I would definitely want to talk about the actual building of the sculpture. Before we do that, I would like to ask you: do you have a work you're most proud of?
Yeah, that's. It's a really difficult question, because you're always. It's very similar to, do you have a favorite son or daughter?
Yeah, I get it.
Because they're all that. And then again, also it's different, because sometimes certain artwork whether it was successful or not, allowed you to get to this other point in your career or in your art making. So some of them become endeared to you because kind of, at the same time, the majority of my works are the sculpture are ephemeral. So after the exhibition, they get destroyed.
Really?
And what lives on is the drawings, and I can make it again. And in my practice, this developed naturally, but it became like a staple that I will do a work. I will imagine this work, and then we'll draw and do all the preparations for the first one. Once I do the first one, after a month or two, the exhibition's over, it's destroyed. And then if someone invites me and they say like, oh, but we want to have this one capsule or this one a spaceship, I'm okay, but I'll be doing it again with these specifications. You need to have this ready and blah, blah, blah. And then it will change a little bit because of the materials that I'll find where I'm going will be a bit different. And I welcome that. And the majority of these capsules, there were many. There wasn't one Mercury. There were many just for the development. And then there were different missions. So there were many Mercuries, and that's why one is like 7 or 8 or whatever. So I'm fine doing many of these. But once someone will, like a museum or a private collector will want it for their collection, well, I do a version for them that's exactly the same, but the structure is like better material, better wood, or more durable material, even if it's more expensive for the structure. And then the outside, I'm even more careful with rust and with other stuff, so it will last a bit longer. And then I turn in the drawings as well when someone buys them, so I won't be making it again, and that's kind of how it has developed. So So the works are alive, kind of. I can always make another one. This one here at the Parish, the Gemini, is part of the ES Contemporary collection. So that one's finished with, and they have the final drawings.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Kind of made me upset when I heard that some of them were being destroyed, but you can always make it in.
Even the bigger ones, And sorry to answer your question. Several I really like. I really like the rovers because of that. Even though I made so many, so it's not one, but like this idea was really a gate to the whole space series. Even if the rovers are not Cold War, they are after. But same with the Space Hotel. But then so those have been gateways, to understand the rover, and then of course, the piece Coachella was definitely just.
So I definitely want to talk about that.
Yeah.
How is that even possible?
Right.
I did some research on it, and I was like, 4 months. It said, and I was like, there's no way this thing took 4 months. This got to take like 4 years.
So crazy, right? Yeah, it's crazy. But you know what? The thing is that in general, the capsules, even if I do a small one, the making of them, it doesn't take that long. What takes long is the whole preparation, the drawings, to visualize things very clearly, the logistics for getting around the place and getting the materials. But once I have the structure has been constructed prior to me arriving, and I have all the materials, really a capsule, I made a habit of putting them together in like 1 week.
Wow.
And just because I didn't have the time, like they would pay me, like one of the first ones I did, a Sputnik for the Museo del Barrio, the S-Files show, that was in, I think, 2012 or something. It was super great that they invited me, Rocio Aranda and the curators, Elvis. They invited me, but the money they had, it was very little for each work, so I had to make it to stretch it, And in that process, on other works as well, it was like, okay, I can only stay here for a week, so I better make it really quick. So it became a habit, and then the same with the Coachella piece. What took 7 months was the designing, all the drawings, all the engineering considerations. because we worked with a group of architects and engineers, which was great. And then Coachella really was just this thing where they tell you, okay, we want what you want to make, and we want to make it huge. And here you have this is absolutely everything you could need to make it. There are all the resources here. Make something crazy. You know?
You definitely did.
And of course, it's a big challenge, but you know what? For some reason, like the scale wasn't difficult. I mean,
wow.
It was a huge space, right? It's the size of a football field, is what the space station occupied. And I based myself after one of the first space stations, which was the Soviet Mir. And Mir was a space station made up of 7 modules. So 7 modules connected in order to make the space station. So so to begin, that was really interesting. But it wasn't as big as what we needed. And I couldn't just like make it bigger, because then those 7 capsules, if I made them bigger, it would lose the scale. And again, for me, it's always very important that it's human scale. So what I did was use those 7 modules as a base in order to build 30 modules. So 30 modules based on the 7 original modules. And then it became a city, right? So it was a neighborhood or something. It became a city, 30 of them. And then, but the team was amazing. The art directors, especially Rafi Lehrer, who I work with from LA, was just, he chose the work and the whole process with him, and it was amazing. And to the point that we're good friends now. We still communicate, so and plan things. So it was really cool. But it was mostly that, the designing, landing this thing, and I was all this time in El Salvador, seeing videos and images, which is usually the way it is, and then thinking and sketching, like so many sketches. I did thousands, and then I many other drawings, and then drawings with the people who did them for Coachella. And then so the actual building didn't take that long. Yeah, a little over 4 months to build, and a big team of people. It was usually a team of around 7 people at a time, but altogether maybe around 30. And I made 3 different trips to Indio, California, which I didn't know. California was my first time, and I really loved it. And Indio, I loved it. It was great. And just finding the materials, took many during the trips. I was always just like looking for more. It was crazy, but it was beautiful too. The desert, just amazing.
Yeah. I can't even fathom like how you were. Like I understand, but it's just so amazing you're able to get all that done, and then so streamlined and organized that it only took 4 months because he just did so much prep work. But I guess that's what you have to do for something that big.
Definitely, but also I cannot take all the all the credit. I mean, as an artist, what you do is that you are designing these objects that will make up this big idea, and you're kind of designing how to make them. A way in which to make them, like you say, so you kind of get streamlined. So, but the capsules, I had made many by then, and it was that same method. It was the same, a wooden structure and make it solid with this and that. What we added up was a telephone post that had to be dug into the ground very deep because this was very challenging, that it had to look very old, to be shantytown-esque. It had to look like it was going to fall a piece, but it most definitely in life could not. A piece or a screw come off, and land on someone at the festival. So, but the thing is that you could work with a team that you brought, but that was so much complicated, or you could work with a team that they assigned to you that usually works it in Coachella production, the Golden Voice. And so that's what we did. So these guys were very organized. The art directors were super well organized. They had done this. They do this every year. So they they know how to work with a workforce like that. And in my case, I have it was really helpful. I have been a teacher for 13 years at that moment. I no longer teach, but I did it for a long time and loved doing groups, working with groups and doing things outside university. And so that really was very helpful in working with a bigger team, setting up a good mood board, and then being there all this time to say, like, this works, this doesn't work, and this is a way to do it. Like, but seriously, like, how do you build shanty towns? Can you really have a manual about it? And I kind of did have it to make it. And for example, materials must never be new. Must never be perfect. There's layers. There's always layers. It's never like just one thing very neat. There's holes here and there, and we play with them. And then after, of course, there were many layers. Then came the lightning, some special effects. There were smoke in some of the modules. But it was really fun. It was really like playing, and I had all the resources. And seriously, I've suffered more with smaller works that have not had the proper, logistics or resources, and I kind of go and get this material, and that's really frustrating. Nothing like that happened in Coachella. That was like all easy to get. If not easy, the resources were there. Mm-hmm. Like, I had a hard time finding so much metal to cover the modules. That was really hard. And I found some amazing ones in old vans, like big vans, car vans. You could get this material, aluminum, that was light, and it looked like a space station, 100%. I just couldn't find enough, and I was searching, like, all the weekends we couldn't work. So the weekends I would take the car, you had to rent a car, and I would be like driving the desert, mapping using Google Maps, whatever, to find junkyards. And that was amazing in itself, just like, and it always is, just I really get to learn about a place in a way that no tourist ever would, because I have to go to the places where you don't want to go.
Yeah, going to the junkyards is like, no one's going to LA, and then time to go to the junkyards. Yeah. That's so interesting.
Yeah, so I get to see all this other side of places and, cities. And in the case of in India, it was just like amazing it was just a desert for me, very new. And the sometimes submerged barns and places where we would find things were just super cool, and a super good adventure, driving there with one or two people. And just a cool adventure. Really.
Yeah, that does really sound like an adventure, honestly. Like, you could probably write a book about the adventure of making the space station.
True. Oh my goodness, all that has happened. Yeah.
That is awesome. So, believe it or not, we've hit an hour and 15 minutes.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yes, it's gone very quickly, for me at least. So I do want to touch on a couple more things, because I feel bad if we didn't. So you have mentioned that you're coming back in April. Tomorrow's your opening, the 24th of February, but you're coming back in April to do workshops and stuff. And I want to know how important is community building and instruction to you?
Yeah, for me here, well, I want to say that first of all, it's been a really a huge pleasure, and I feel very honored to have been invited to Mass House and to the Shinnecock Reservation. For me, has been definitely one of the highlights of this one mission, and trying to get to know more about the local community, particularly the one in the reservation. So Jeremy has been amazing for that. Jeremy and Brianna have been just like amazing. Everyone I've met have really given me a lot of it. So I can see that here there's an artist community as well, and then there's different communities that make up Southampton. For me, Salvador, also that is a very important thing, to always be connected to the place where I live, and to talk about that, because that's really what you can do. You have your feet on that ground. So so for me, always good to connect, be that through also not just shows, but talks, workshops, and April for me, I'm super glad to be doing a whole week worth of workshops, and we're gonna build stuff and think about the future and think about stuff which I think it's important, problem solving, and I always avoid just decoration, and just fun. Also, let's think about stuff. So I think this is an excellent place to do it. I'm actually really would like to also have a group of people from the reservation or Shinnecock, if it was possible, to have a group come and do a workshop during that.
Yeah, I definitely think that's very possible. There's the Boys and Girls Club. Well, that would be a great option. I'd be a little jealous because I want to build a rover also, but there's some.
Oh well, we will have workshops that are not only for kids, but also for adults. And I personally am a firm believer of playing, and games are super important for adults. Problem solving, also fun activities. So do come.
Okay. Well, now I'm definitely 100% coming. I had no idea. When I first read about it, I was like, oh, damn. Just for these lucky-ass kids. Best day ever. Let's see. Let me just make sure I didn't miss anything in here. Okay. Is there anything that I should have asked you about?
There's always so many things, right? And so many projects. Now I look back at my work and I see, wow, so many works that I've done, and here was a good opportunity to not make new work, but rather use work that I had already done, but work on the installation itself. So for the people that are listening to this and might want to come and check out the show, then there's a lot of local materials in the installation, and I've made sure to include some materials that also refer to the land. And Jeremy was able to lend us some materials from here, even around Mass House. So I think it's important to have a little bit of the place in the exhibition that will go back to where it was after. But I want to say that I'm really grateful to Southampton and the people I've met here, the reservation, but also at the museum and other places have been super kind and warm, and I didn't expect that. I mean, I knew people were super nice, but it has been really amazing to stay here. Also, I got a bit of snow, which I loved. I come from super hot, and I'm going to super hot tropical coast weather, and so this was very welcome for me and to connect. So I've been doing these walks and connecting with the area, even though it's a little time. And I'm really, I think I want to continue getting to know more about Shinnecock and the community and Jeremy's works. I'm really blown away also by the quality and his thoughts. So just want to thank the whole community, Southampton and at the Shinnecock Reservation for sharing this time, and also you, Hunter, for giving me this time to talk about all this stuff, and hopefully people will listen to it and it will complement their visit to the Parish Museum.
I hope so too. I can't believe you're thanking me for having you on the podcast. Thank you for being here. And one thing we had to mention is what date is it showing? So June 5th, I think?
The exhibition opens to the public on Sunday the 25th of February, and will go on until January 30th.
January 30th?
Yes.
Wow.
June.
June 30th.
Oh my
God.
Still a long time. I think many months to look at the exhibition. And April, be on the lookout for the workshops. And I hope you come and visit.
Yes, I definitely will. I'm very excited to go tomorrow. Let's see. I feel like there's one more thing. Oh my God, I wanted to mention the trash wars. I'm so upset thinking that all the things I saw were destroyed. Well, I guess there are Star Destroyers that were, so I guess it kind of makes sense. But I just want to say I think everyone should look, if you like Star Wars, as someone who loves Star Wars, the helmets you made, even though they're not like the big giant ships, but it's felt the attention to detail on the helmets were
Those
so
are
amazing.
Recent. Yeah, those are super recent. I actually have a I have a hard time with small scale work. It's like in that sense, even the Coachella piece, I didn't think it was difficult to scale. But in smaller work, I find it difficult, and the helmets and masks and the spacesuits, then it's my way of trying to do also smaller work that it's still human scale. So and then as a passionate lover of 80s and 90s science fiction movies and cartoons, I've been doing this series of works based on both Transformers.
Wow.
And then Star Wars. And I just want to say I'm always thinking of the original 3 movies of Star Wars, and I'm usually thinking of the original cartoons from Transformers and the toys, and not the recent ones, which are sometimes so complicated. And yes, so I like that retro thing to it. So now, I've been doing the mask, the Stormtroopers and Darth Vaders for some years, and I did this show which was mainly about trash wars in San Salvador, and I'm always mixing elements from. I also want to say that I always do just like the Empire's spaceships and masks. I never do the good guys. I
never do the rebels.
Only do the bad guys. Yeah, just because their design is so much better. Come on, like, it was true for those movies and other bigger conflicts. But I think playing with them and for them, I'm using a lot of found materials from the beach, and particularly sandals, rubber sandals, because they're very available, they're very flexible. They are very all these materials, after they've been in the ocean for so long, the salt has also cleansed them. So I think also that's something I like, and that's why if you go to my Instagram page, you'll see that's one that's much more updated. You can see some of these masks and helmets that were just displayed in this show called Entrelazos in Paris, the 193 gallery in Paris. So there's a couple of them that are in the my profile, my Instagram. So check it out. Also some bigger spaceships I've built before. If you go back, you'll see some of them. And I'll probably continue playing with them. Even though now I'm really going back more like towards archaeology and the past after doing futuristic things. But I think I'll always be doing that. Yeah.
That's very interesting. I'm very excited to see what you do next, and to see what's going on tomorrow. I don't know. Just your work's so amazing, and honestly, if there's any one person you ever check out that's been on the Modest House podcast, it has to be you. If you have the same likes and things as I do, I think this is definitely some of the coolest stuff. All right, I think we've hit the end. I did promise you a chance. If you had one, you'd be able to ask me a question if you wanted to, because now I've asked you a bunch of them. So if you have one, now's the time.
Yeah, well, actually, I have a bunch of questions, but we have time for one. Yes, I have been very curious, particularly for me, particularly about the Shinnecock, Shinnecock people and Shinnecock Nation. And I see that you're here at Mass House. There's a lot of work, and with your podcast being done for that, towards that end. And I relate some of the problems and struggles that happen here to some that happen in Central America, particularly certain indigenous group like the Maya in Guatemala. But I've seen that, for example, language is something that a lot of people don't know or is not in use. Also, maybe some traditionally dresses, whereas in Guatemala, like men won't wear it, but women do wear the traditional textiles of the people. So, I'm curious to know about the local identity. How does that play into the everyday, more than in particular moments where I know that there are gatherings, which I think important, and I'm really curious about that too. But how important are these indigenous, some concepts and ideas or ways of life in your everyday, and where do you see it heading, given that you are making work that also revolves around that?
So, pretty multifaceted question. But I guess I'll start with, for the podcast aspect and language. Language is a lost language. We are reviving it. So there's been a lot of work done. There's actually another group that is making a VR game to save the Shinnecock language, basically. So you can like learn it there as if you're in a classroom in virtual reality, which is pretty cool. But we never like used to write things down because we have an oral history, and then that gets lost. It's just really be passed down, and then they would say, well, how do we know that's right or whatever? Or how do you know you're telling the truth? Because you're just speaking. But we would just pass down the stories. So that's kind of somehow the podcast got started. It's like, well, now we're officially recording the stories. And so now we're recording our own history and other artists. And I thought that'd be important. And in terms of like the clothing, the regalias, when I was younger, I did not live here. My mom, my family, we all lived in Westchester County, which is it's like Long Island, New York City, and then Westchester. So we lived out there. And I was the only Native American kid. And so my mom would come into school and give presentations dressed in her regalia and like educate everyone. It's like, we don't live in teepees anymore. We're like doing all this stuff, but would give them like the history. And then when I was really young, I dressed up, and I didn't really want to dress up anymore at school, at least, because people were like, I didn't know what was going on at the time. And then we'd come back here in the summers, especially for powwow. When we weren't playing sports, we'd always be here, and we'd wear my regalia mostly for just like one weekend out the year. And I didn't like it. It's actually like, it sucks wearing the regalia sometimes, because it gets so hot, and you're wearing just like full leather, and then you have a deerskin vest and like a fox on your head, and it gets very warm. But it's like, as you get older, you're like, well, I have to do this at this point. And one thing about Ma's house, the workshops we do here, I've made a bunch of things from my regalia, actually, and I've made a bag out of just leather scraps, which you can kind of see over there. I know people can't see on the podcast, but those. And those, the longer ones, we made belts to go around, and I designed my own belt, made a bag, and then over there's a loom making. And I've learned how to make a loom now. Like, we made those, even the wood was from scratch. We, like, cut up the wood and, like, connected it all together. And that will probably be on my my regalia. I made, like, a hat. So now as I'm older, I'm like, oh, I could add this to my regalia when I do wear it. And there's more pieces, especially like jewelry, is how which I'm not wearing any right now, but my favorite piece of jewelry I own is this. I got the powwow, just a Persian. What's the word? Persian. I want to say opal, but it's not opal. Just this really cool looking material. And then I have these rings, and I'm big on like necklaces and rings. So I don't have earrings or anything. And then like a modern watch. So it's interesting. But like that over there, I'll make it into a bracelet probably, or something around my head, and that'll be part of my regalia. So that's how we kind of keep it alive. And very important for me, now that I'm getting kind of old, I have to start remembering what everyone says when I do hear tidbits of information from the elders, so then I can be the one to give it to someone else, like if I have kids or whatever, or anyone who's younger. So that's a little stressful. It's like, now I have to really listen. When I was a kid, you're like, what are you talking about? Now I'm like, oh crap, if I don't listen to this right now, no one's ever going to hear about it again. Yeah. So that's good. So I've recorded some stories also from people, so.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I guess because that's really the only way for things to live. Otherwise, it becomes like folklore. And I love how, for example, Japanese people do it. You know, they're able to have their past, like threaded into today. Yeah, you know, and like anime and these characters, even robots, refer to mythological beings from the past. So that's why I'm really curious, because also I think there's so much knowledge, right, that that's there, and so much poetry that is worth keeping, but also making new stuff based into that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very difficult to. There's a lot of things where I'm like, we probably shouldn't do this anymore, because it's like we live in the future now, where if we keep doing things by, not necessarily the traditions are bad, but if we don't like become a little more capitalistic, and although we don't want to, it's just like we can't be poor forever, and we can't just expect people to just constantly want to help us. So we have to have, some of us are going to have to go to school. We can't all be artists, and I luckily am an artist, but we have a lot of my cousins all went to college, and like, so it's slowly turning into, everyone's realizing, okay, now we're not indoctrinated or anything, but we're able to play within the game and then come back and make everything better for everyone else, and not get taken advantage of by using the system, which I think will be more. That's where I see it heading, is people are going to realize they have to use the system that's in place to their advantage instead of letting it take advantage of them. So I think right now we're finally at a point where you don't have to get taken advantage of by the system. They can make it work for them, and then have your sovereign self and your outside world self and kind of merge them at the same time. But you have to be an outside world person for a while. Yeah. And although no one really wants to, everyone just wants to really build it from here, but it's difficult.
You have to go out of the bubble and comfort zone.
Exactly. You have to go out, which is so great. It all kind of loops back into your work, and Dan. See what you did there. All part of the plan. Yeah. People are going out of their bubble.
Came back to the beginning.
Yeah. All part of your plan. I see. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on. And now your floor is yours to plug all your social media, anything you want to shout out, anybody, and any causes, whatever you want to say. Now's your time.
Well, thank you to begin with. Thank you, Hunter, and everyone who listened to this podcast. I appreciate you giving it the time and wanting to find out more. I also want to thank Mass House. Jeremy and Brianna have been amazing, and the Shinnecock people that I've met have been very welcoming. Same with Southampton people. So I want to thank everyone. I want to invite everyone to come to the show, Tropical Space Castaways, and I hope you take your time in connecting with this. If you want to see more of my work, it's not hard to find me online. I think if you Google Simón Vega art, you might find some of my main pages. In Instagram, I am there as Simón Vega Taller. Taller means workshop. And there's where usually I have my more up-to-date stuff, and it's more playful. And you know how websites are. They are, and sometimes you are not keeping them up as they should. That's my case. But still, you can find me on Blogspot, simonvega.blogspot.com. And I hope you guys can come and see the show. I will come back in April, like you mentioned, the first week to do the workshops. So you also can connect with me through Mass House. And I would love to get a group together from the Shinnecock, if possible, and have a special workshop. So let's think about that. We have a month to do that. And also, so yes, Jeremy and Brianna in particular, I want to thank them. And institutionally, the Parish Museum has been amazing. Everyone from Monica Montagu, the director, to Corinne Ernie, to Brianna and Caitlin and everyone, the whole team production, Kevin, amazing. So I want to thank everyone. So the show is also a collective effort. And for me, well, I have work to do the rest of the year. I will signal also some work at the Art Basel in Miami in December. That's have a solo booth, preparing for that. and also doing new work. If you come to El Salvador, definitely hit me up. I was surprised the other day. I took an Uber, and the driver had been to El Salvador, actually,
Really?
and he knew a few archaeological places, and I was super happy with that. So I will always look forward to welcoming people from here to El Salvador and also to our exhibition. So thank you everyone. Thank you everyone at the Parish and at ES Contemporary who have helped me, Mario Cater particular, been behind all this to get me here. So very grateful, and everyone on this beautiful land. Thanks.
Yes. And we also want to shout out the Parish Art Museum one more time for making this possible. Yeah. Thank you guys. Thank you for guys who are listening. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Moss House Podcast. Thank you for being here, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode.